a lot of good players do this, okay? A lot of high handicappers and low handicappers are actually doing a very similar thing with the golf club. It's just the lower handicappers have found a more functional way of doing it. The lower handicappers are actually... Today, I've got an amazing tutorial for you because it's actually out of a lesson I did this morning with John. And I think there's a lot we can take from that lesson that's going to help you too. And it's featuring a new exercise. It's a GRF exercise, but it's actually a tennis ball drill. And it's my double tennis ball drill. And this is going to help you understand the orientation of the golf club so you can start to attach feelings to meaningful movement. What we're actually matching up here is not just the intention of the movement with the outcome, because there's something missing in the middle. It's the action. How do I recognize what I'm doing? What's the motion of the body in the club? What movement am I making that's actually creating that ball flight? I can be thinking that I'm swinging further right, and in effect, swinging further right, but am I doing it in the right way? And I'm going to show you that because John today, through misconception really, has spent the last 10 years of his life working on a concept in his mind that was actually adding to the problems he was experiencing. And you're going to see it next week in the lesson video. So you're actually going to see the effects of this in real life with John. But I want to talk to you first of all about the exercise that I used. John had pull draws and push cuts, and he had to aim straight as a result of this. He had no option because he wasn't sure if he was going to get a pull draw or a push cut, fearing the pull draw, fearing the push cut, so it leaves us no option but to aim straight and hope we hit it straight. And I'm going to explain now why it was happening. So if you want to do this exercise with me, grab a couple of tennis balls, bit of masking tape, packing tape, sellotape, one couple of inches from the end of the club, from the end of the hosel, one couple of inches from the end of the grip. So we're going to create new reference points. We're going to reframe the concept of how this piece of equipment is used. So let's use this lie tool to show where the sweet spot's pointing. Now when we stand to the golf ball, you can see the sweet spot isn't actually aligned with the leading edge. That's normal, we've got loft. And what John was doing, he was returning the golf club to impact like this. And he was getting toe deep divots and toe strikes. He could draw the ball every now and again, but it was really by a gear effect. As he's delivering the club too steep, the natural reaction is for the face plane, which is where the sweet spot is, to tilt to the right. I've not opened the face, all I've done is just tilted the shaft up. Now that opens the face. So he's now got a face that is opening, essentially. He's got a sweet spot that is tilting to the right. This is all happening in the swing. So as he's swinging, he's delivering the golf club a certain way where the face is tending to open, so he had to then employ some kind of release to square the face up. And it was a very kind of late recovery mission on a path that was going left because his shot patterns were pull draws and push cuts. So when he hit the pull draw, he rotated the face and he got a pull draw, sometimes a straight pull. If he didn't rotate the face in time, he's now got a ball that starts straight or starts right, but the path is still to the left and he's got push cuts. This was John's movement solution to strike the golf ball, because that club head is going to take a beeline for the golf ball, because he was thinking of swinging the club head. And sometimes he tried to swing into out, but the problem was he had a golf club that was steepening. So if he did try to swing into out, he still had the same problem. It's still got a face that was trying to open and he's got to try and rotate it. We don't really recognise these things because this is the body's natural subconscious adaptation, and this is a great thing, but we've got to utilise that in a positive way. So looking at the lie angle of the club, because this is what it's all about. It's about the lie angle, and this changes as you go through the set. So what we're looking at here is the orientation of the club. So a driver is going to be much longer, much shallower, a wedge shorter, more upright, and that's going to influence how we swing. Now John, when he picked this up and started to make some practice swings, what he recognised was that this ball started to move that way, and he started to use this ball here as a reference for where the club was going. So he was using the club head as a reference, and he tried then to swing from the inside, but he was using the club head as a reference, and that's what he'd done in his past. Now a lot of good players do this, okay? A lot of high handicappers and low handicappers are actually doing a very similar thing with the golf club. It's just the lower handicappers have found a more functional way of doing it. The lower handicappers are actually leading with this ball trails, but they do actually steepen the club. So they do have an opening face, but what they do is they're able to regulate the rotation of it. And they're coming from a shallower angle, which is more suited to hitting longer clubs too, because of the shallower lie angle. So they're able to hit the long irons, their fairway woods, and generally be quite strong long iron players. It's functional for what they intend to do, but it's still a steepening shaft, but they've found a way of doing it. Now, if we're steepening the shaft this way, as John was doing, this is very different. Ultimately achieving almost the same position at impact, but it's the direction the club's going. That split second still shot will look similar, but it's what's happening before and after that's creating the golf shot. So John's lower tennis ball, upper and lower. So we could say handle tennis ball, club head tennis ball, okay? Or upper, lower. So the club head tennis ball was leading the action, and this was overtaken to get to the ball. What we did was we changed the concept and we said, now this tennis ball has to lead, not this one. So he swung back, and now he was going to focus on this tennis ball and lead. And then allow this one to trail as far behind as possible. So you can see it's a very different looking action, purely by shifting his focus of attention onto a different part of the instrument. So we're becoming aware of the whole instrument and start to understand the dynamics of it in motion. We're going to start to swing the club now very easily on an in-to-out path if we desire. But what we're also doing is ensuring that this ball stays in front of this one. So we've now got control. Once this ball takes over, can you see what's just happened now? This ball has to stop to let that one go. Think about the loft, think about the low point. The low point of the golf swing now is stalling. Here, it's still moving forward. And then as soon as we start to release, we've got a downward angle of attack. This tennis ball, the lower tennis ball, always stays behind the upper. So this could be an in-to-out path, but that's a very different mechanism to this. That's still moving through the same space, but a very different way. Because what this is enabling us to do, by controlling the upper tennis ball, is essentially control the loft. This is of the utmost importance with the driver, but you'll see that in the video with John, how we managed to get him hitting up, but de-lofting the golf club. We're also keeping this ball outside of this ball, so the lower ball stays outside the upper ball. It doesn't start to line up. This one does not get closer, i.e. vertically. It stays outside. So we're feeling this natural arc to the swing. We often spend time on the downswing thinking about where we're positioning the club and things like that, although I don't recommend it, but we often do. But we don't recognise where this takes us to. So the body never really adopts it because it's not totally sure of where we're going. So the nervous system starts to kick in and create that kind of bracing, that fight, flight, freeze response. So here, where does this take us to? Might feel a very different finish. Notice this is still outside here. So notice the lower ball is still outside the upper ball. Even though it's moving around the body, it's still outside. We've not had this happen. What this exercise is going to enable you to do is recognise what face rotation is. It's rotation about the shaft. It's a clockwise or counterclockwise, from where I'm looking, movement of those tennis balls. It's not this. We've got to ensure the sweet spot is travelling down. We want to compress that ball. So the upper tennis ball needs to be well ahead of the lower tennis ball. And the lower tennis ball needs to stay outside of the upper one. And if we want to rotate the phase, we rotate the tennis balls. That doesn't happen at impact. It's far too late. It's happening far too quick. And it's playing havoc with the low point because we're making a very big movement for what is essentially just a very small rotation of the face, as opposed to a micro move, economy of movement. Making a little movement here because that's all that's required. We don't need to make big movements for what is essentially just a small adjustment. So this is happening in the swing, and this is what you're going to experience as you're swinging down. We are going to keep the lower tennis ball behind the upper, but rotate them counterclockwise. and it continues in the through swing. So you can see where the tennis balls are now. They're on the left-hand side of the shaft. They've rotated. So there's a very recognisable rotation taking place, and it's happening in the downswing and in the through swing. So we can influence that trajectory of the club, we can influence the path, we can influence the angle of attack. If we maintain the relationship here, we've now got the upper ball going down and round, and then back round and up. The severity, the angle of this is going to really influence the strike on the golf ball, the trajectory, so we can play around with going down more and out, which is then going to help accentuate that draw, but we've still got a downward angle of attack. We're not losing that all-important lag. We're not releasing early. We're not using this mechanism to square the face up. We're going to be using that rotation around the shaft. We're transferring momentum through the system. We're getting essentially effortless power through real efficient sequencing because of the orientation of the club. So the orientation of these balls here is going to help facilitate the use of that kinetic chain, ultimately ramping up your power, less effort, more output, more control, more repeatable release patterns with that compression that we're after, but ultimately the opportunity to adapt as well. We can go left if we want. We use this upper ball, we can go left. We can go right. Because we're always trailing with the lower ball. So ultimately that's giving us control of the club and the path that we're creating, which is going to open up the opportunity then to change the angles of attack too. We're going to go, as you'll see with John, to the driver in the lesson, maintaining that relationship, but on a completely different angle of attack, but ultimately de-lofting the golf club with a positive angle of attack. And that is the secret to really solid, compressed golf shots with a very strong, low spinning ball flight. We want to reduce the spin loft, and that's how we do it. And you'll see that in the lesson with John. This is going to put the control back in your hands. So guys, this is the drill. The tennis ball. Have a go. Drop your comments below. Let me know how you get on, and enjoy the lesson with John next week.